Team Innovo Consulting from Canada.
My name is Daniel, and alongside me today are my colleagues, Shirin, Emma, and Michael. And together, we are Innovo Consulting. At Innovo Consulting, we pride ourselves on connecting the dots for VW AG globally. We have been tasked with the challenge of prioritizing 5 strategic issues, and our prioritization is as seen on screen. We have prioritized them in this way, based off the organizational impact, the financial benefit, the ethical adherence, and the urgency of the matters. To begin today's presentation, I'd like to invite Shirin to discuss.
Thank you, Daniel. Now, in order to develop an effective strategy for VW AG, we considered both qualitative and quantitative information, such as the new CEO's recommendation to centralize certain business functions, which has a high cost savings of approximately 9 billion euros that has a positive NPV of 38.9 billion euros. However, this poses as an ethical dilemma as many of the divisional heads and the CEO himself hold multiple positions within the organization. Therefore, Innovo Consulting recommends to establish a hybrid structure consisting of centralized and decentralized functions to guide the management strategy. In phase 1, Innovo Consulting recommends to disperse the decision-making power through its business structure and the leadership structure. This can be achieved by centralizing certain business functions, such as pricing, trade discounts, salaries and wages, and direct factory overheads to ensure the configuration of value chain activities to realize those cost savings and invest towards the e-mobility initiative. Next, the decentralized business functions include advertising, firm infrastructure, operations, and service to ensure that there's high local responsiveness and make sure that we are supporting the group's growth goals. With that said, as I mentioned before, the current organization structure does pose an ethical dilemma due to the high consolidation of power within the management board, as you can see on the bottom left of the screen. We recommend to hire heads of business functions such as group-wide sales, production, IT, etc., to create a flatter organization and avoid these conflicts of interest, as you can see on the bottom right. Next, in phase 2, the management must attain the board of directors' buy-in to implement these structural changes in order to guide VW AG to achieve its goal on both a global and local level. And next, in phase 3, the group must set an appropriate tone with the use of culture summits to ensure that the employees' values, to make sure that the employees are change accepting, as many of the regional offices will now have new divisional heads. So for example, at Volkswagen South Africa's Culture Summit will be a one-day conference filled with team activities, keynote speakers, and workshops to align the employees' values with that of the groups. Ultimately, the employees will be creating a culture they want to work in, thereby increasing their productivity. With that said, I'd like to welcome back Daniel to talk about the e-mobility initiative.
Thank you, Shirin. With the rise of electric vehicles are creating a brighter future across the world, and especially in Africa. Nations here have the ability to skip combustion engines entirely and pursue a sustainable future. VW AG can position themselves to become the #1 electric vehicle producer across the world by 2025. Innovo Consulting has developed a strategic implementation strategy to help VW AG achieve the 2025 visions. We recommend VW AG acquire batteries from S1 Panasonic and integrate them into the VW ID vehicle series. S1 Panasonic emerged as the most cost-effective and highest quality option. To ensure this deal's closure, its ethical adherence, and the reliability of batteries, a cross-company task force will be assembled to monitor the situation. The batteries will arrive ready to be integrated into the MEB platform as per the contract. Continuing, VW AG can look to gain government rebates in key countries to assist the marketing and sales strategy. We recommend VW AG conduct a partnered marketing campaign with Uber. This campaign will target millennials, as millennials are Uber's largest demographic base and VW AG's largest consumer base moving forward. This creates a valuable opportunity. Similar to Uber Up, users can request an Uber ID, as demonstrated on screen. This allows for the generation of positive publicity, new revenues, and increased market share in all categories, countries, and segments. Concluding the 3rd year of our implementation strategy, VW AG will secure a new battery agreement with a battery supplier. This then allows for the development of our category and segment matrix, which will outline how VW AG will sell 50 EVs into the market by 2025. Of course, each of these electric vehicles will have their own marketing campaign to ensure the success of their launch. Continuingly, the most important thing about the most important thing about VW AG is securing a sustainable and scalable future. That's why it's the only thing that matters that is consistent in life is change. That's why you must invest in solid-state battery technology as it's safer, more reliable, and faster charging by partnering with these organizations and ensuring a sustainable future. To continue today's presentation, I'd like to invite Emma.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Currently, VW AG is managing multiple product lines and brands within its portfolio. In order to maximize efficiencies and create room for the e-mobility initiative, it's important that VW AG analyze its product lines and identify models that are loss-making and cease production. Innovo Consulting recommends that the company begin with the volume segment and identify models that do not meet that 6.75% operating margin that VW AG holds. The reason we think that VW AG should begin with the volume segment is because it's the lowest contributor to the company's bottom line at 11.92% net profit margin compared to the premium and super premium segment at 13.89% and 18.04% respectively. Moreover, VW AG must take into account all the cost savings realized once they cut those unprofitable models. If brands were to cut those unprofitable models, VW AG could realize a cost savings of just over 3 billion euros. Innovo Consulting calculated this, assuming that revenue remains constant, but the operating margin would increase due to the fact that you have eliminated those unprofitable models as well. The plan that Innovo Consulting has created will take place in 3 phases, but will take 3 years to execute. The first phase starts in April 2018 and will last 4 months. In this phase, you must look at all the models that are available in each respective market and cut the models that do not meet that 6.75% operating margin. So for example, if we were to consider the South African market, the cars on the screen behind you, or on the sides of me, would not be available for production anymore. The second phase, which would start in August 2018, would involve you actually ceasing production. And in the third phase, you would evaluate your progress and change your plan depending on what the customers and the markets demand. All these cost savings will help you create room for that e-mobility initiative. I'd now like to introduce Michael to talk about the Paris Accord.
Thank you, Emma. In order for Volkswagen to become the world's #1 producer of EVs, it must take into consideration the additional requirements of the Paris Accord. By weighing the financial and operational impact of each strategic option, Innovo Consulting recommends strategic option 2, which consists of the construction of the MEB platforms and adjustment to current engines. This will provide Volkswagen with over 4.4 billion euros in value added to the firm and the flexibility in adjusting current engines. This strategy can be executed in 3 main phases, with the first phase encompassing the initial funding of capital of the 11.75 billion. This will consist of a debt offering of 7.2 billion euros at current market rates and 4.5 billion euros of equity offering. From this, once the capital needs are met, Volkswagen will also take into consideration through shareholder dilution, solvency of the firm, and current capital structure. Phase 2 will consist of the construction of the MEB platforms and adjustment to current engines. Efficiency will be measured through the process and resource management. Phase 3 will then consist of the continuous measurement of the MEB platform to ensure that it is compliant and efficient throughout its lifetime. Through the use of a balanced scorecard, which Innovo Consulting has provided a sample as seen on our far right of the screen, this will encompass 4 main pillars of internal business processes, financials, consumers, and emission targets. This will allow Volkswagen to not only be compliant with the Paris Accord, but also take into consideration and keep up to date with the changes in consumer taste and legislation. With this, I'd like to pass it over to my colleague Daniel, who will be going over our timeline.
Thank you very much, Michael. We've created a timeline to help outline our implementation strategy. And as seen in the beginning slides, we've removed cobalt from our prioritization. As seen, there's only 4 here because cobalt has been resolved through the acquisition strategy we took in our e-mobility strategy. We've also then created a risk matrix and highlighted 4 main risks. And the one I'd like to direct your attention to is risk number 1, the governance risk between Volkswagen HQ and its regional subsidiaries. Now, in order to mitigate that risk, you can establish a communication strategy where the regional offices act locally and uphold the global values, ensuring that everyone is communicating on that same level, like my colleague Shirin had mentioned earlier. Therefore, in conclusion, we've developed a clear management strategy. We've created a target marketing campaign to sell the 50 EVs by 2020. We've eliminated the vehicles not operating at the operating margin and invested in MEBs to produce a sustainable future. In the words of Herbert Dice, never let a crisis go to waste. We are Innovo Consulting. Thank you so much for your time. And if you have any questions, we've been more than happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Team Innovo. That was a very good presentation. Thank you for coming to give us insights on what we can do to turn around our business. I've got a key question for you. When you were talking about our centralization and decentralization strategies, some of the areas you advise us to centralize is pricing and HR. Now, given that we operate in different markets with different cultures, different appetite to pricing, different structuring in terms of salaries, remuneration, how do you envisage that we can successfully centralize and dictate pricing globally, knowing that it's something that has to be customized to each market? Same thing for human resources, knowing that we've historically treated our people according to the dictates of the market. How do we get away with centralizing such sensitive and strategic matters? That's my first question for you. So I'll allow you to take that, and then my colleagues would also ask you their questions. Thank you.
We would like to take a minute to confer with the team. Thank you so much for your question. I'd like to direct your attention towards our first slide on the strategy structure and cost optimization. Within that slide, when we were talking about the centralized and decentralized functions, we came up with the centralized functions as we were provided with them, and then the decentralized functions were advertising, firm infrastructure, operations, and service, because these are the key value chain activities that we need to make sure we are leveraging in order to have that high local responsiveness within these separate markets. So specifically in terms of centralization, as my colleague Daniel had mentioned, in terms of the risk mitigation, that was one of the risks we did identify, that there might be a little bit of inconsistency between the communication from the VW headquarters to all the regional subsidiaries, which will be mitigated through constant communication from the VW headquarters to the regional subsidiaries. So that's how we would make sure that the pricing and the HR functions are consistent with each one of the markets, but the responsibility would be centralized with the headquarters.
Thank you very much for the presentation. So you mentioned something about the crisis they don't need to be on a waste or something. You need to utilize the crisis. I like it a lot in that. But can you please explain then, if there is a crisis and there is a lot of changes coming up in the environmental point of view on the Paris Accord, why, first of all, you are not taking this one as a key priority? Can you please elaborate on that? And the second, just a follow-up on the question, with all the centralization of the labor force, of course, you're going to have an impact in people. Can you please elaborate how you're going to approach the unions and how you're going to make sure that this is going to be successfully implemented, and how you're considering this in that? Thanks.
Very good question. The reason why we didn't have Paris Accord as our highest priority is because when looking at the operational impact, the organizational impact, my apologies, and the financial, we thought that by looking at the organization as a whole, we would need to have the vision of the organization as one steady vision, and that's why we decided with strategy to be number one. From this, we are able to guide our organization down one path, and we thought that by doing this, the decision making will be more streamlined, and then that way, moving into the Paris Accord and making these changes will be a lot more efficient this way. In regards to the labor unions, as my colleagues have also discussed, we can keep our communication ongoing with these unions as well as the board in order to ensure that they are also in the loop and that they are also actively engaged in this process and through this transition.
Thank you very much for the presentation. In your presentation, you selected Panasonic for the batteries. What I would like to know is, firstly, Panasonic is doing business with your key competitor, the number one. Have you considered the risk attached to that, which would include sabotage, for example? How did you think about it to put your eggs in the same basket?
I appreciate the question. When considering S1 Panasonic, we looked at the battery chart that was provided to us and identified that they had the lowest cost and highest quality of the batteries amongst the alternatives that were presented. So while we understand that Tesla is at the time of the case still using Panasonic batteries, equally at the time of the case they had presented their own mission to eventually make their own batteries and provide their own batteries to their own vehicles to centralize more of their functions in their supply chain. So seeing that as something that has been prevalent inside the market at this time, we understand that Panasonic could then look to Volkswagen Automotive Group and becoming the primary battery supplier to Volkswagen, as in by 2025 you'll have 50 electric vehicles on the road, you'll be leveraging the MEB platform, and your demand will be much higher than Tesla's demand as far as the number of batteries you need, making it a valuable opportunity both for you and for Panasonic to provide batteries to Volkswagen Automotive Group.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I really liked the diversity, the creative thinking that you applied to your solution, and also, for example, your use of phases. I've got some short questions. I want to check out your thinking. I want to be sure I understand you. Do you see these 5 things, to use a word, that you have ordered in order of priority as priorities or strategies? So in other words, your first was a centralization, followed by e-mobility and so forth. Do you see these as strategies or as priorities in terms of timeline?
Thank you for your question. When picking out our priorities, and I encourage you to look at the prioritization and focus chart inside of our report amongst the different 4 indicators that we were considering when ordering our prioritizations. That is how we developed the way that we organized our presentation today. It's not a sequential sequence. One does not happen after the other. That's why on our timeline you see all of them are starting fairly soon, but are not capital intensive depending on the stage. So that's why we view them as interlocking and interlal to actually designing the solutions for other ones and actually implementing at different times.
Great.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And then I just want to jump to a second point, and that is, for example, you suggested looking at solid-state batteries in the future. My understanding is solid-state batteries are significantly more expensive than current batteries. So what was the thinking there? Because cost is batteries, in fact, are the largest cost in an electric vehicle, and are one of the 3 big reasons why the market isn't demanding electric vehicles.
Yeah.
So what was your thinking about suggesting solid-state batteries being so much more expensive?
It's an absolutely valid concern. When we were looking at solid-state batteries, one of the things that we needed to consider was the lifetime supply, or the limited lifetime supply of cobalt. Cobalt's running out in the world. If we had gone with the strategy to build batteries inside of our own house, we'd only be able to do that for less than 5 years.
Okay, so
right?
let me stop you there, because
So
I get your thinking.
Yes.
But you see the challenge. You're suggesting potentially another problem. So let me ask you this, a last question. How do you suggest that Volkswagen goes about never repeating Dieselgate? How do we get to, it's lovely, but how do we get to a situation where this never happens again? What could they do strategically with their resources to make sure that this is never repeated? And if you need a bit more clarity, I don't want to lead you too much. So I'm interested to see how you approach this.
The way that Volkswagen ensures that this never happens again is not only through the management being aligned both as a headquarters and as a local unit acting local, but also caring about the community as Volkswagen's #1 priority today and since the crisis will be the community and will always then therefore be the community.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.